John chapter 8, I read, Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning, he was back at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of the religious law and Pharisees brought a woman they had caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the very act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, "All right, stone her, but let those who have never sinned throw the first stones." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to her, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." Jesus was in the temple court at dawn on this particular day. It is believed he was in the outer court, the court of the women. He wanted as many as can to be part of this teaching session, and so he must have chosen that particular area so that there would be unrestricted access to him. It was while he was engaged in this important activity that the scribes and Pharisees rudely interrupted him and pushed into the midst of the group an unnamed woman they accused of having committed adultery. The woman, unfortunately, was merely a pawn in the game that these religious leaders were playing. They were really after Jesus Christ and were ready to catch him in the trap they had set. They had branded him a lawbreaker, so they wanted to see if he would maintain the law of Moses, which prescribed the death sentence for a man and woman found guilty of the sin of adultery. We find this in Leviticus chapter 20 and verse 10 and Deuteronomy chapter 22 and verse 22. Jesus proved that he was one to uphold the law when he said to them, "Yes, go ahead. You may stone the woman to death, but on one condition. The one who picks up a stone to stone her must himself be without sin." Jesus Christ stopped them in their tracks. They realized that they themselves were sinners and had to remove the log out of their own eyes before they could see clearly to remove the speck out of the woman's. Jesus Christ was not condoning the alleged sin of this woman. He simply wanted to point out to these self-righteous scribes and Pharisees that they were clearly able to see the evil in other people, whilst they were blind to their own evil ways. When Jesus opened their eyes to their own sins, each one of them left the temple courts. They had to leave the woman alone with Jesus Christ, the one sinless person who could pass judgment on her. Jesus was willing to forgive her and put her on the path to a new life. Dear viewer, we have moved into another phase in our observance of the Lenten season. Yesterday, Sunday, was Passion Tide, the beginning rather of Passion Tide, which means we are now in an intense period of our observance. I pray that we may examine ourselves daily and take ourselves to Christ to have mercy on us and forgive any failings we may have. Let us concentrate on working on a right relationship with God and focus less on the wrongdoing of others. If we must take others to Christ for forgiveness, let us do so prayerfully and in love. There are many who cannot take themselves to Christ, but need to be taken. And if indeed we are moved to do so, let us do so in love. And when we do take those persons to Christ in prayer, we must leave them alone with Jesus Christ. For he is the one to pass judgment and grant pardon upon repentance for and confession of sin.
Until her heart was torn by betrayal.